More than 9,000 people in West Africa died from Ebola in the last year. There were 4 confirmed cases with 1 death in the U.S. The experimental drug ZMapp, developed here in San Diego, was used to treat a few Ebola patients. The drug will begin human clinical trials in the next few weeks in Liberia. Michael Kalichman, director of UC San Diego's Center for Ethics in Science and Technology, joins us with what's at stake. And Michael, this human clinical trial will have up to 100 Ebola patients as participants. Some of those people will get the ZMapp drug. Others will not. Those who don't get it actually will just have the current standard of care treatment. So how is this different than the typical clinical human trial study?
What's different is this population and the circumstances that make it so difficult. What is the same is that we're trying to give somebody a new drug and comparing that to people who get the best treatment that we have available so far, which is the standard of care.
Some doctors question the ethics of doing a study this way, where everyone has the infection and could die, but not everybody is getting the drug.
This is true of any study, but it's worse here because so many people are so aware of how devastating this disease is. But the reality remains that until you know if the drug works and it's safe, you don't actually have something that's better for them. So it may be better to not be on the drug. We won't know until we do the trial.
In other words, the drug could have side effects or things like that.
Exactly.
What kind of things would stop the continuation of this trial of ZMapp?
Well, if it was clear from early work on the trial that more people were getting even sicker or the mortality rate was even higher, but with a disease that is so devastating as it is, it may be that it won't be apparent with 100 patients. They may not be able to see that.
So 100 patients seems like kind of a small number of people to try this out on. How many of those would have to be cured? I mean, how will we know if ZMapp is actually effective?
That's a tough question. I will simplify it by saying if 100% of the people died normally with the infection, then you would need a relatively small number of people to see that people were surviving from it. But if the death rate is lower than that, for example, if it's on the order of 30 to 50%, which we often see, then it's going to take a lot of patients to be able to achieve confidence that the drug is better.
Now, MAP Biopharmaceutical in Sorrento Valley got $42 million from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to develop a ZMapp, to develop the drug, the serum, and to get it on a fast track to the FDA. So how could that influence, or could it put pressure on doctors, the developers of this drugs, or the results of this clinical trial?
Well, we always have a worry that if people have financial interests, they might do things that are inappropriate or compromise the best integrity of science. But the reality is there's no other way to do this. Without the resources, it wouldn't be possible to do such an important clinical trial.
And I understand that money came rather quickly. Our government took this threat very seriously. There's also an Ebola vaccine that's being tested as well in Liberia. What are the concerns with the vaccine?
What are the concerns with the vaccine? The main concern would be that that if you're going to do the trial, you don't know, again, whether it's safe or effective. It's not as bad usually with vaccines. We know that they tend to be relatively safe, but we do have a problem that we may have people, for example, who get the vaccine and think, I have a vaccine, it works, I'm safe, and they won't take precautions they normally should have taken.
What are some of the cultural or social conditions in West Africa that could influence, let's go back to the ZMapp clinical trial, or are there things that could influence that trial there?
Well, for all of these trials, the biggest problem is the usual issue that we want people who participate in a clinical trial to be informed and understand what they're getting into. In this country, it's difficult. In a circumstance where people aren't familiar with research, where they come from poor socioeconomic backgrounds and communities, it's extraordinarily difficult. The standard has to be higher for how you do the trial. Make sure you get truly informed consent.
Is this sort of we're between a rock and a hard place doing a trial like this?
Absolutely. At a rock and a hard place where you have to deal with it now. You can't wait until later to try and deal with it.
All right, Michael Kalichman, thank you so much.
Thank you.